Tyler, thanks for joining us. A lot of attention on this phone call that you made to Joe Biden. A lot of people call President Trump and he picks up the phone. I've never known of anybody that's actually called Joe Biden and had him pick up the phone. How did that go?
Yeah. So, as for this book that I wrote with my, former colleagues at the Washington Post, we wanted to tell the definitive and comprehensive story of the 2024 election, and we wanted to talk to all the key players involved. So my colleague, Josh Dawsey, went down to Mar-a-Lago 10 days before the inauguration and had an interview with Trump. Biden's aides repeatedly rejected my request for an interview. Their excuse was that he was working on a memoir that we now know about, has been reported. He got quite the sum for it, and that would conflict with my book. I didn't think that was a particularly good excuse. So in March of 2025, after he had left office, I got his phone number and I called him on his cell phone. I wasn't sure exactly what to expect. He didn't initially pick up. I didn't leave a message. I figured I'd try him at another time. But later that day, I got a call back from him. And I told him who I was.
Hold on. So when he didn't know that it was you that had called, you didn't leave a message?
Correct.
So he literally sees a number that's like 555-1212 and says, I wonder who this is, and calls back.
Correct.
And you pick up the phone and does he say, this is Joe Biden, who is this?
I mean, it's actually funny. I was at my apartment and my phone was connected to a Bluetooth speaker and there was music playing and it was interrupted by the, sort of Bluetooth saying call from Joe Biden. So I quickly grabbed my phone and answered it. And I don't exactly remember what he said, but I think he said hello. And I said, hi, Mr. President, told him who I was. I'd been covering him for 6 years and what I was working on and why I thought it was really important to talk to him for the book. He said he was about to have dinner or having dinner and that I should call him back the next day. Shortly after I got off the phone, I immediately got swarmed with calls and texts from Biden's aides. I didn't answer or engage with them. They had made clear that they did not want me to talk to him. And he said that I should call him the next day. So the next morning I called him back and he picked up and he was getting on an Amtrak train. So there was like noise and commotion. He answered 2 very brief questions and then got on the train and hung up. Didn't say, don't call me back. Why are you calling me? Remember, he told me to give him a call the next day. And then when I tried to call him back later that day, it went straight to voicemail. And 2 days later, when I called the same number, it was replaced with a message from Verizon Wireless that said this number has been disconnected or changed.
Oh my God. Can you imagine? I mean, I just think of this as a contrast of how many people have President Trump's cell phone and call him. I was a little surprised. Let me ask you this. As you've watched, when I read that anecdote from your book, and then I saw some of the Biden aides not talk to the House Oversight Committee, I really started to think, is that a pattern? I mean, so you've covered them. You wrote this definitive book. Do you connect those dots, or is that a bridge too far for you?
Yeah, I think they're 2 different matters, right? I think one of them is a legal proceeding or quasi-legal proceeding. And there are concerns that I've heard from the Biden folks about participating there. And some of them have, not all of them have.
Right.
But I think to take it away just from that specific, House investigation, there was a culture around Joe Biden that he was not nearly as available. I mean, Trump is in his own camp of a president that repeatedly picks up the phone from anyone who calls. We have not seen a president like that in modern times, but it is undoubtedly true that Biden was not engaging with the press as much as his predecessors were. And throughout his entire presidency, he never did an interview with the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal. He did intermittent TV interviews, but he was not a president that was regularly engaging with the press compared to his predecessors.
Hey guys, I hope you're enjoying this conversation, but if you're looking for a way to get to sleep tonight and stay asleep, I've got the answer for you. For over a year, I've been taking Beam's Dream Powder. It has made a world of difference. I fall asleep faster, I stay asleep, and I wake up ready to go. If you want to join me by taking 1 scoop every night before you get to bed, go to shopbeam.com/Spicer. Use code word Spicer at checkout for up to 40% off. Trust me, everything stems from a great night's sleep. Go to shopbeam.com/Spicer, code word Spicer. All right, back to the conversation. And don't fall asleep yet. One of the criticisms, especially from my side to a lot of the reporting that's come down, whether it's your book or Jake Tapper's, is, wow, now we find out. When you hear that criticism, how do you answer that?
Yeah, I think there's a few things. One, the idea that Joe Biden was old and that voters had concerns about his age and him running for re-election was not new. If you look at polling from before the 2022 midterms, the majority of voters, including the majority of Democratic voters, thought Joe Biden was too old and did not want him to run for president. So this was not something that came up after the debate that then people started to pay attention to his age. This is something we were writing about in real time. And every time you went out on the campaign trail and talked to Democratic voters, they kept talking about their concern that they didn't actually think Joe Biden was fit to run for a second term. Even his supporters felt that. So I think if you look at just the sort of case study of voters, very clear what story they were telling. Also, we wrote many stories about his age and questions and concerns about it from voters' perspective, from other lawmakers and the like. I also think one of the things about this story, Sean, is that a lot of people were not willing to talk about this when he was president. And that is a conundrum that reporters face all the time, regardless of which president is in office, in which aides and friends and colleagues are not fully transparent about their concerns. I think we catalog the ways in which they made accommodations for his age. But Sean, I think the other important thing to tell your viewers is that many of the people who worked for Joe Biden genuinely believed he was fit and able to serve as president. We have reporting and interviews in the book with Mike Donlin, who called it an act of insanity that Democratic voters and leaders pressured Joe Biden to drop out. They thought, and still do, that he could have defeated Donald Trump should he have won. So I think it's important to understand, even with the revelations and the questions and concerns, many of Biden's inner circle still believed he should have stayed in the race and still believe to this day that he could serve as president, which many voters clearly do not agree with that assessment.
Well, I testified in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee a few weeks back, and one of the questions they asked me was, how do we prevent this? And I mean, to your point, I mean, the aides are going to be the aides. They're going to, I was unapologetically supportive of President Trump. I mean, that's what you do as an aide to the president that you serve. But I did say there were some tells, and one of the tells that I thought was interesting is when the Biden White House stripped 440 hard passes. I have to think part of it was trying to take away some of the heat that might come from some independent reporters. If you got asked that same question, based on all the reporting that you did for this book, what do we look for going forward? How would you answer that?
I mean, I think one of the challenges, and this is time immemorial, is reporting on presidents' health. And this is not a partisan issue. This is something that, given the nature of patient-doctor privileges and sort of secrecy around president's health, it's a challenge for every American and everyone who cares about the president and getting transparency. The way in which the doctor reports to the president, it is a challenge to really get a full accounting of a president's health. I think there are various conversations about Congress trying to pass laws demanding certain amount of disclosures and transparency. But the nature of living in the White House and the nature of sort of being commander in chief is that there's no obligation for a president to release medical information. And I think, the sort of tradition we have of a president going to a physical and then the White House releasing a report from the doctor, that's not mandated. That's just a custom. And we've seen presidents time and time again just disband with custom because they don't want to follow through with it. So I think it is a question that a lot of voters are asking, and a lot of lawmakers of both sides are. And we're seeing this is not just Republicans. Democrats, too, are calling for more transparency around lawmakers' health, particularly the president.
You mentioned the book that Joe Biden's team said he was writing and that the conflict it would pose. But it's not just Joe Biden. He's writing a book. He got $10 million reportedly from Hachette. Kamala Harris is now writing this book, 107 Days. Even Corinne Jean-Pierre says she's writing a book. In the course of writing your book, you and your two other co-authors, obviously you mentioned Mike Donlin. I'm sure you talked to every top aide. Just when you look at the landscape now and say, okay, there's 3 books coming out, and how would you, if you told somebody based on, again, because I figure you guys talk to all of these people, what do you think they want to put out if they thought your book was competition? What do you think that the narrative is that they might want to try to sell us on? That everything was roses and sunshine? I mean, what is, because that, if they're using the phrase it's competition, they got to think that they're going to have something in it that you're not. But I just figure because you talk to all these folks, you got to be picking up tells what they're going to, is it about settling scores? I got to imagine he's going after Pelosi and a bunch of other people to try to settle scores about who undermined him, et cetera. What did you pick up in the course of your reporting for this book?
Yeah, and Sean, you just named 3 books. I think there are many other senior Biden officials who are either writing or planning to write books. So we will have a library of books to read in the coming months and years from Biden officials. Look, I think they want to tell their side of the story, whether that's from Joe Biden's perspective about, trying to shape his legacy and how historians will remember him and decisions that he made. I imagine, given sort of the focus of the end of his presidency and through much of his presidency, Biden will talk a lot about foreign policy and his engagements with world leaders. He will write the sort of traditional, I imagine, presidential memoir, shedding light on his decision makings and whatnot. I think there's always settling scores with these sorts of memoirs. We've seen that from former Trump administration officials, former Obama administration officials, former Bush and Clinton. There's always an element of trying to recast the narrative in a way that's more favorable toward you. My understanding based on reporting about Karine Jean-Pierre's book is that she is focused on sort of pointing arrows at the Democratic Party for abandoning Joe Biden. So again, to your earlier question, there is clearly a belief pervasive among some of Biden's closest advisors that the Democratic Party erred in their pressure campaign to get Biden to withdraw from the ticket.
Okay. Tyler Pager, I appreciate you being with us on this Friday as we head into the weekend. The book is 2024, How Trump Retook the White House and Democrats Have Lost America. Now, and by the way, I would just say this. As much as we talk a lot about the excerpts being about Biden, I know you and your colleagues spent a lot of time at Mar-a-Lago and the Trump campaign. So I may not have gotten the same attention, but I know there's some great anecdotes and stories and breakdown for people out there that aren't just about Biden that want to hear the inside. So I like the way you guys constructed this. It's a little bit both. So thanks for being here. Best of luck as you continue to go out there and promote this.
Thanks so much for having me, Sean.
You bet.
Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.